Hey there, guys. Happy Wednesday. Can't remember if it was Wednesday. This week's kind of gone by fast. But today, before I get started on our guide on macros, I do want to discuss a few things that are happening as far as my business is concerned and personal training and things of that nature. So, um, my sale has ended for the Christmas sale. I've ended it. But I do have another promotion coming up here in the next couple weeks, the middle of January, where I'm going to do my 14-day challenge again for anybody who's not actually joined the challenge. So basically, what the 14-day online fitness challenge is where you'll get access to all my programming, like any of my clients. Trainerize, Evolution Nutrition, everything is included. You get access to that, all of it for 14 days for free, and it is a way to sort of show you what I can offer you, how my program works, how it's structured. Um, it just so you have all the information you need to make the decision to reach your goals. Because that's what I want to do is give you all the information that I can give you all the value I can, and allow you to make the right decision to reach your goals. So I will be starting that in January. I'm gonna make a sign up to where you can go into Trainerize, or yeah, it would be into Trainerize where you would just have to put in like your name and email. It doesn't require any payment method, so you wouldn't have to worry about that. Once the trial ends, it ends, and you can decide from there if you want to continue on with the program. So that's basically what it is. I will be offering that. I will probably have the sign up to join the training program next week, and then you'll officially have access to Trainerize and your workout program the following week, at the middle of January. So that's what I have going on this month. Um, as far as that's pretty much all I have to say. I don't think there's anything else. I did want to mention that I'm going to start promoting more of that as it gets closer, and I'll share the sign up sheet with you guys too as well. So let's go ahead and get started with today's topic. I'm sort of excited to talk about this because I think this is an important topic to discuss. Um, and I feel like not a lot of people are very familiar with this topic. So, what I'm going to talk about today is a guide. Well, this is basically going to be a guide on macros. So, let's first sort of define exactly what macronutrients are. You may have heard the term macros from different, whether it be personal trainers or anybody else in the fitness realm, they may mention macros. And you may not fully understand what that means. So, what macronutrients, in other words, what they mean are they are the essential nutrients that are needed to be consumed in large amounts each day. They play a critical role in keeping our bodies healthy. So these are the major nutrients that you need to sort of sustain your health. And the reason why they're called macros is because you need them in large amounts. And there is three different types of macronutrients. And I'm going to go ahead and get into this here. So the three types are known as proteins, fats, or lipids in other terms, and carbohydrates. So these are the three things that you keep in mind when it comes to macros. And macros are very essential to basically sort of relay back to your fitness goals. A lot of my clients, they track their macros. It's an important thing to keep in mind. Depending on what your fitness goals are, your macros are going to be different. A lot of what I do as far as my clients, when they have their weight and height measurement, that usually determines, that'll determine their BMI. And through the app that I offer, it is able to calculate what their macros are needed for their particular goal, whether it be gaining muscle or whether it be fat loss. There's various different ways, I guess, or not really ways, but there's various different types of sort of, whether it be meal plans or anything of that sort, as it relates to, tracking your macros. So the first thing I want to discuss here is proteins. I talk about proteins a lot. And a lot of the reasons why I talk about proteins a lot is it's essential to, muscle gain. It's one of the key essential things that I focus on with my clients. But it also can play an important role in fat loss as well. Um, and, again, like I mentioned with previous live streams, and, with whether it be a specific exercise plan that you're following, specific nutrition plan, you want to follow those plans based on your goals. You want it to be a, accompanied to your particular goal. So what exactly is protein? So protein serves various important functions in the body, such as the synthesis and repairs of cells and muscle tissue. Protein is essential for muscles, bones, organs, hormones, enzymes, hair, skin, and nails. So protein plays a major role in various parts of our body. I do want to discuss a little bit more into detail as to what protein is. So when it comes to protein, again, it's one of the 3 macronutrients. It serves various important functions in the body. One of the primary functions of protein, like I mentioned, is the synthesis and repair of cells and tissues, such as collagen, elastin, and muscle. Proteins are required for the synthesis of hormones, enzymes, antibodies, and peptides, as well as the transport of various compounds throughout the body. So proteins may be used for energy if there's a need due to inadequate caloric intake, carbohydrate intake, or fat intake. So it can be used to sort of supplement that. So one of the things that I've mentioned in the past, I've talked a little bit about amino acids, because I did a live stream a while back where I talked about EAAs, which is essential amino acids, and sort of talked a little bit about the structure of protein. But protein is primarily the combination of amino acids and peptides. And there are 20, as far as amino acids, there are 20 amino acids, of which 9 are considered essential amino acids. So amino acids make up primary portion of protein. And there's so many different amino acids that I could discuss as it relates to that. But what I want to talk about before we move on to carbs and fats is I want to mention what exactly a complete protein is and what an incomplete protein is. So a protein source, when it comes to complete proteins, a protein source that provides all the essential amino acids. An incomplete protein is a protein that lacks one or more of the amino acids required to build cells. So amino acids are an important part of protein, and they play an important part in our health as well. So with protein, I do want to go a little bit further and give you an example of what complete protein sources would be and what incomplete protein sources are, or what complete protein sources are and what incomplete protein sources are. So as far as for complete proteins, that would be meat, poultry, seafood, eggs, dairy, anything of that sort. You probably somewhat know that. That's basically the animal sources. Now, there's also non-animal sources that you can get from protein. This is mainly like nuts. Like you have quinoa, soy, things of that sort. An example of incomplete proteins. Now, I know I mentioned non-animal sources. There's only a few as it relates to complete when it comes to nuts and things of that sort, and that's mainly soy and quinoa. But in incomplete proteins, there are also nuts that are separate from the. Okay, so let me backtrack that. So, as far as the non animal sources of complete proteins, it's mainly soy and quinoa. Now, when it comes to incomplete proteins, as far as non animal sources, that would be beans, peas, seeds, nuts, anything of that sort. More of grains and things like that is considered an incomplete protein source. So rice, oatmeal, and then when you go into vegetables is there's also incomplete vegetable protein sources, which is spinach, broccoli, collard greens, Brussels sprouts, avocados, things of that nature. So that's just to separate both of these. And again, I want to reiterate what complete and incomplete protein source means. So again, with a complete protein source, you're getting all the essential amino acids. With the incomplete, you're getting only a few of those essential amino acids. That's basically summing up what incomplete and complete protein means. So let's go ahead, which I sort of basically discussed the examples of protein. So examples of protein can include various foods such as lean chicken, fish, milk, cheese, etc. Protein can help maintain muscle mass as well as making you stay fuller longer throughout the day. Another thing I want to mention when it comes to protein, because that brings up sort of how I mentioned about fat loss. So eating protein allows you to stay fuller longer. And that is what is essentially what is going to help with fat loss as well. Not only does it help maintain muscle mass and building that muscle, but it's also helping you to stay full. So you're not wanting to eat as often. And I have protein like every day. Like every morning after I work out, I always drink protein. And it fills you up. Like I could almost not eat a meal after I have like a protein drink. Like it's a filling thing. So that's something to keep in mind. So when you're intaking protein, it's not only helping with maintaining muscle mass, but it's also going to help you stay full longer, and you're not going to be as hungry. So when it relates to fat loss, that's something to keep in mind. All right, so fats and lipids. So this is the other. Excuse me. This is the other. Dang, I went blank again. This is the other macronutrient. I couldn't think of what it was called. This is the other macronutrient that we're going to discuss. I don't know why I went blank. I knew what I was talking about. So, fats and lipids. Lipids or fats is the one class of compounds within the larger lipid family, and they're comprised of triglycerides, phospholipids, and sterols. Fats help aid in vitamin absorption, hormone creation, as well as regulation. So, when it comes to fats are just as important as protein and carbohydrates. And not all fats are bad. When you hear fats, you automatically think of, gaining weight and things of that sort. But fats are something that we need. It's essential for us. It aids, like I mentioned, vitamin absorption, creation of hormones, regulation, things of that sort. So you need fats. So let's go into a little bit of what triglycerides, phospholipids, and sterols are to sort of, give you a better understanding of what those mean, because those are pretty large terms, and I want to explain to you guys exactly what that means. So a triglyceride is basically the backbone it's basically the glycerol backbone with 3 fatty acid chains. So that's basically the description of what a triglyceride is. It's a food source found mainly in like solid fats, animal and plant sources, and oils of that sort. So it's going to be more animal-based fats is where you're going to find triglycerides in. Phospholipids is also a glycerol backbone with two fatty acid chains and a phosphate molecule. So basically, food sources where phospholipid is found is egg yolks, lean meat, soybeans, grains, seeds, anything of that sort. You're going to find phospholipids. Um, and when we go into sterols, this is a ring-like structure of carbon and hydrogen atoms. So what you find in this, what kind of food source you're going to find sterols is mainly in animal fats, meat, poultry, fish, shellfish, egg yolks, things of that sort. Cholesterol produced by the liver, plant sterols, cholesterol in plants. So um, any, the sterols in plants, which is basically the cholesterol in plants, but it's primarily found in meat, poultry, fish, shellfish, and egg yolks. That's basically what sterols is found in. And it's pretty much a combination, like a structure of carbon and hydrogen atoms. And basically what the sterols do is it's mainly a precursor to many hormones, such as estrogen, testosterone, vitamin D synthesis in the body. And that's pretty much sort of a example of what sterols are. I hope that you sort of understood what I was talking about here. But essentially, these are basically the different categories of lipids or fats. So let's go ahead and continue on. So an example of fats or lipids. So there's various examples of fats, or otherwise known as lipids, and they can include butter, oils, avocados, nuts such as almonds, pistachios, etc. So not all fats are bad. There are different types of fats that are healthy and some unhealthy. Some fats are classified as either saturated or unsaturated, which is the next topic that I wanted to get into. So unsaturated fats. Unsaturated fats are fatty acids with one or more points of unsaturation double bond in their chemical structure. So they just, depending on their degree of unsaturation, if an unsaturated fat has only one single point of unsaturation, it is classified as a monosaturated fat. So with unsaturated fats, that's basically what it means is, so if a single fatty acid chain in a triglyceride molecule has a point of unsaturation, which is a double bond of that molecule, the fat is classified as unsaturated. So let's go ahead and continue on and explain what saturated fats are, to sort of get it sort of balance between the two. So saturated fat is a type of triglyceride. We're talking about triglycerides again. And its chemical structure has no double bond points of unsaturation, usually solid at room temperature. So examples of that would be butter, whole milk, beef, anything of that sort is known as a saturated fat. So it's going to be more solid in room temperature. So that's pretty much an example. They're sort of showing you the balance of the two, of what they are. So as far as that's concerned, that's pretty much all we're going to get into with fats. In the future, I may go a little bit into detail because there's so much more that you can discuss as it relates to fats. And, I could go on all day sort of explaining that. But let's go ahead and get into the last of the three macronutrients, and that's known as carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is one of the biggest topics now. And it's important to sort of address exactly what carbohydrates are, or otherwise known as carbs. So carbs are our body's main source of energy. So there are two types of carbs known as simple and complex carbohydrates. So an example of carbs is rice, breads, pastas, bagels. They're all examples of simple carbs. Oatmeal, whole grain, potatoes are examples of complex carbs. So as far as the structure of a carbohydrate, So carbohydrates are pretty much categorized into various groups. So I already mentioned complex carbs, like I mentioned here, but it also is separated into simple as well as glycogen and fiber. So those are all categories of different types of carbs. So when it comes to each of these, glycogen, let me explain a little bit further what glycogen and fiber actually mean. I know you've probably heard of fiber before, but I want to go into a little bit more detail on what it means because it's all classified under the same umbrella of carbs. So let's start with glycogen. Glycogen is glucose that is deposited and stored in the body tissues such as the liver and muscle cells, the storage form of carbohydrates. So it's a more stored form of carbohydrates in the body. Fiber is an indigestible carbohydrate present in plant foods such as fruits, vegetables, and legumes, beans, things of that sort. So that's why with fiber, so it's indigestible, so your body just cannot really process it. So that's why it does make you use the bathroom. That's part of why fiber is like that. So I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail as to what that is. Complex carbohydrates. So basically, it's a long chain of simple sugars. So an example of complex carbohydrates would be whole grains, legumes, beans, nuts, anything of that sort, and vegetables. So that's an example of complex carbohydrates. Now, as we continue on, so when it comes to the recommended sort of intake of carbohydrates, now that can sort of vary. Like I mentioned before, you really do need carbohydrates because it is an energy source for your body. If you don't get enough, you're going to feel more tired. So, increasing your uptake with carbohydrates is what is going to help that. And, that's the big thing now is there's this low carb thing. And it's something to keep in mind that carbohydrates are not completely a bad thing, that it is an energy source that you need. So let me go through some recommendations as far as for carbohydrates. So if you're doing like light exercise, you want to get around 3 to 5 grams of body weight based of 3 to 5 grams of carbohydrates based on your particular body weight. If you're doing moderate exercise, say maybe 1 to 2 hours a day, you want to get 5 to 7 grams of carbohydrates based on your body weight. So, depending on how much you exercise, you're going to need more carbs, basically. So it's an energy source. You do need it. It is something to keep in mind. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and move on. And that's pretty much all as far as sort of discussing a little bit into detail what the macros are. But what I want to talk about next is calories versus macros. So calories and macros are completely different, of course. So calories are essential unit to measure energy, and all macros contain calories. So what I want to break down here is what 1 gram of each of the macros are. So 1 gram of protein is essentially 4 calories. 1 gram of carb is 4 calories. And 1 gram of fat is considered 9 calories. So 1 gram of each of the macros, you've got 4 calories for protein, 4 calories for carbs, and 9 calories for fats. All right. So that's something that I wanted to mention before we close out. Something important to keep in mind. If you guys have any questions about anything today that I've discussed, feel free to contact me. I've got my phone and email here. And let me know what your question is, and I'll be willing to answer it. I always, like to answer any questions that you have. And in the chat, if you did reply or if you sent a comment in the chat, I will be sure to get back to it and explain and answer your question in the best way possible that I can. But I hope that you guys found this information valuable. I hope that you took something from it. I do want to keep talking more into in detail about nutrition, because I feel like it's a key part as it relates to any fitness goal, really. So I am going to start sharing a little bit more information about nutrition, and sort of discuss. I really want to break down a little bit more of the macros in detail, um, and sort of discussing a little bit more exactly on what carbohydrates are, on what fats are, because this is more of a simplified version of that. Because I just want to discuss the separate macros and sort of what they mean, what they are, and a little bit of what the recommended need is. So if you have any questions about anything, feel free to let me know, and I'll be willing to answer those. Any questions as it relates to, you know, if you really want to get started with my training program, I help you with all of that, with anything as it relates to macros and things of that sort. So, if you're ready to get started, feel free to contact me. But that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. Again, I hope you found this information valuable. I do have next week's presentation event already in the group, which I'm going to be discussing about hydration and water, and sort of the recommended fluids that you should be getting daily and things of that sort. So I'm excited to talk about that too, because I do have, I love fitness, but it is really essential to talk about the nutrition side of it, and, anything of that sort, because they both play a key role into each other. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next live stream.